Hey guys, Derek here. It's been a while. I haven't really made a video recently, but I just don't feel like I need to follow the algorithm or the whatever. But this video, I feel like, man, I really want somebody to watch it to get, if I can get one person to see what I'm saying. It's not about my opinion, it's a question about your own perspective. Do you see God in the way that He's been presented through church, through media, through all that stuff? Uh, which is pretty much fulfilling the prophecy, like He said, my name will be profaned throughout the earth. Do we see Him like that? Do we see Him as the Pharisees saw Him, where they were just so focused on the rules, the works, everything? Or do we see Him in a different way? And this comes down right now in this video to reconciling Old Testament and New Testament God, the way that He is speaking and acting in in the New and Old Testament. So when Jesus said, "When you've seen me, you've seen the Father," people did not get that, and they did not get why He was healing people and forgiving people. How could, like, that's not the God that they knew. That's not what they've been trained. So I want to talk about there's a lot of, like, in the Old Testament, a lot of people, when they read the Old Testament, they get confused because they're still seeing God in this way and they're not understanding this whole thing about the law of sin and death before Jesus came. And they see Him in a certain way. And it's funny because we read the Bible, we think everything everybody says in the Bible is right in a way. It's like, but you'll see that a lot of people in the Bible, they didn't have certain revelations, and so they were speaking from their highest revelation. And so I'm going to look at Joshua. So one thing I just as a summary, if you look at the Old Testament and you think about the sin of law and death, look at Genesis. God created man in His own image. And He also said that whenever the blood of man is spilt, blood must be spilt for that blood for blood, because the value is there. We're made in God's image. Throughout the whole Bible, you'll see that our value never changes in God's eyes. And in the law of sin and death before Jesus, like when there is a sin against somebody, how can money cover the loss of an eye, for example? If let's say my eye is taken, right, and God says, pay $1 million for Derek's eye, and I'd be like, okay, so my eye is worth $1 million, so my other eye is worth $2 million, so my money is just worth money. My body is just worth money to God. That's like very limiting, because money is a limiting thing. Like, money changes. The value of money changes, and it's all just trading stuff. Like, there's no value, there's no amount of money that can place on a human life, on the value of a human life, because God says so, because we're made in His image. So that means that the only way that blood can be paid for if there's injustice is by blood, because then it's of equal value. And in the time of Moses, when the world was full of sin, it's like, first of all, if there is nations who are burning their children alive and that child goes to God, God says your blood will be there will be justice for you, right? The only way that there can be justice for blood is by blood. And when there's too much sin in the world, like, it's kind of like in my mind, it's like and again, this is from the Old Testament, it's like when there's a negative, there has to be a negative, and then it just becomes a zero. And that's kind of why He had to flood the earth, is because the justice, if all the justice was administered right then, it's like everybody would die. That's my thinking about it, right? So if we look at, what is that noise? I don't know what that is. I think my computer's doing that. Pause. What is that? That was weird. Morse code. So I want to talk about Joshua 9:7. No, that's not right. Joshua 7:6. So this is very funny and interesting. When Joshua became a leader recently, right, and they took the city of Jericho, somebody did not follow God's instructions, and he took a lot of the things that he should not have taken. He broke the law or whatever, right? And then when they tried to fight another army, they lost. And Joshua said in 7:6, then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of God, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If we only had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord, what can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? It almost sounds like he's giving a speech. It almost sounds like kind of religious. The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe us out. Wipe out your name. Wipe out your name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name? And the Lord said, stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run, because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. So, from what I'm seeing in this wording, and has his response by saying, stand up, what are you doing down on your face? And how he's saying they have been made liable to destruction by their sin. It's almost like God is saying, like, the law of sin has been violated. Like there's no way to be blessed. There's no way to have me with you when this has been done. And God never changes his justice, right? And I just think that's amazing, because when you read that passage, how do you see it? Do you see it, and when you read the Old Testament, do you see it as the way that I mentioned in the beginning, is what he said in the beginning, is how our value never changes, we're made in his image, there must be justice for anything wrong that's done to us, right? And you notice that if anything wrong is done to someone, but it's not physically hurting them, it's just done to their property, it has to be paid in property, right? If something is stolen, it has to be given, you have to be given something, right? But when it comes to our value, something like a death or like an injury, it has to be paid for in death or injury. Like, this is just the law of sin and death. But when Jesus came, his blood on the mercy seat, restoring our value, like the whole thing in the Bible, it's a love letter to mankind saying, I know who you are from the beginning. You are valuable. Look at what I've paid for. You are loved like you are meant to be loved. So I reread the Old Testament. I mean, I've been rereading it because I've spent a long time in the New Testament, because I had a Bible that was only the New Testament for a while. I was trying to get a hold of because I was out of the States, and I was trying to get a hold of one with the Old Testament. I didn't like reading from my phone, but finally I got one when I went back, and I've been rereading the Old Testament. It's amazing how my perspective changed. And this is kind of the key, because how are you going to give yourself to a God that the world says is super evil and strict in the Old Testament, and then they just see it through the eyes of, maybe through the eyes of Joshua, when he made that reply where he assumed that God just wanted to wipe them out. And like the Israelites in the desert, they just assume his character is one that just, has evil intent. They think of him as evil. They think he's just so strict and he just wants to kill us. And something else, I think it was Deuteronomy or before that, you hear God say, he kind of laments and he says, oh, that the Israelites would just follow my commands and everything would be well with them. And it shows that that's what he wants for us. He's not waiting for us to sin so he can, punish and show, like, he laments like, oh, I wish that they would do this. Oh, and you hear his heart, and you hear Jesus, the same lamentation, like when he's talking, he says, oh, Israel, how long I've I've longed to gather you under my wings like a hen, like a, what is it? I don't remember. Like a rooster gathers the chicks, like a hen gathers his chicks under, but you were not willing. And it's like, it's the same pattern throughout history. And now we have Jesus showing, like God showing his heart to the world. We have it, but the devil comes in and says, I'm going to turn this into religion. I'm going to turn it into responsibility and have to. I'm going to make people confused about his character in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Like, I'm going to do whatever, you know, and there's so many lies out there. So it goes back to my channel, the same thing. Like, you'll never give your heart to God as long as you think that as long as you don't know who he is, as long as you have the eye that's self-centered, that sees what he can do for us, and knowing him is the only way. And I just wanted to make this video to present this, I guess, I think revelation, or just like a way of seeing, which Jesus said. It's not just my opinion. It's when Jesus said, you have seen the Father, you have seen me, and he is all love, because there's no more law of sin and death. He can forgive, and he can forgive you, and that's amazing. That's amazing. I would say get rid of all the stuff in your life that's reinforcing this idea that we are not valuable. Like, there's so many, it's just all out there. Like, if you go to the YouTube, it's all out there. It's like, even like, what are we doing with our time? We're doing stupid crap. Like, a lot of us are just wasting our time on stuff that doesn't matter. And it's all built on us not knowing our identity, us not knowing our value. And I'm telling you, like, when you learn the kind of life that God wants for you and I, the Christian life becomes a supernatural life. It becomes a life lived by faith. The Bible says the righteous will live by faith. And the more that you know God's character, the more that you understand that he doesn't want us to strive, he doesn't want us to suffer, he doesn't want us to live trying to think and figure everything out, because that was the analytical thinking of Satan that came in. Like, when God said, do this, he wants us to obey like children, right? But Satan came in and said, did he really say that? Maybe he just blah, 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 and then just implanting this lack of trust. Okay, I could go on. Sorry, I could go on. But thanks for watching. Have a good one.